Welcome to Pure Intuitive Talk with me, Trish Smith. I'm a multi-dimensional channeler sharing my gift to assist others to connect and work with their whole being, helping bring them into a beautiful way of high-frequency living. Immerse yourself in an hour of nourishment that feeds your spiritual journey and invites you to embrace your empowered soul. You'll feel armed with new understandings for how to shift from pain to love as we explore topics from shamanic sound healing to gut health. Are you ready to take accountability for the impact that we have on the world around us and learn new tools and techniques to feel whole again? Of course you are, and you're in the right place. Pure Intuitive Talk starts now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Pure Intuitive Talk. I'm your host, Trish Smith, and we are tuned into Transformation Talk Radio. Thank you for being here. And today we are going to be talking about relationships, right? And nurturing long-term relationships, what that looks like, what it feels like, what the rewards are, what the challenges are, and everything in between when it comes to relationships with other human beings. So I'm not sure about anyone other than myself, because I've only been living in this body and this mind with this spirit for the last 48 years. But in my experience, I myself too have been the problem in a relationship. I have been the cranky one on a particular day. I have been the one that has been in the negative mood. I have been the one that's been a downer at times. And so I myself personally am not willing to hold everybody else to a perfect standard because I myself am far from perfect. And so I wanted this episode to be somewhat of a, remember how the humanness, right, in the other when we are considering who we want to have in our lives. Kind of trending now, and I hate to say it that way, but it's become popular really to cut people out of our lives, to push away people if we consider them negative or toxic. And I've gone over in other episodes, like, what does that look like? What are we talking about when we talk about somebody that's toxic, And is somebody truly toxic? Because let's be honest, that should be abusive and really causing strife in your life. I don't believe that we should view somebody as negative or toxic if maybe they lost their spouse or they lost a child or a sibling. They've suffered significant loss and they're having a really hard time and they're down. And maybe they're not their best selves, right? Maybe they are using coping mechanisms that we don't even agree with, right? It's common for people to pick up a drink and try to numb some of that pain, right? And when we really stop and put ourselves in someone else's shoes, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, well, can we blame them? We don't always have to agree with somebody's coping strategies, but at the same time, I don't know that we should kick them out of our lives for it, right? And let me be clear when I'm explaining that, because there's a difference between somebody turning to really hard drugs and, maybe now you have a family member that's breaking into your house and stealing your family heirlooms, right? So there's a big difference between somebody who's genuinely toxic and causing problems, and their behavior is disrupting everybody's lives and causing problems for you and your life or your family's life. And then people that are just going through hard things, but their behavior isn't affecting you. Maybe they are not the most fun person to be around, but we're all going to be in those shoes at one point in our lives, maybe multiple times in our lives. And so I want to encourage people to not turn their back on others' suffering, right? And when we're looking at another's suffering, we have to be able to look within, right? And decide for ourselves what kind of person we want to be. That was my last episode, was, are you who you want to be, right? So when it comes to nurturing long-term relationships, You have to be able, if you want to have long-term relationships, to be the friend that you want to have, the lover that you want to have, the daughter, the son, the sibling, whatever that is. You have to be able to be that, right? And so we'll talk about ways that we can be that, what that means, what does that look like? Exercises in our lives, right? Like, are we exercising patience for others? Are we exercising forgiveness, right? Now, I know I've mentioned in the past, and I have clients that I've said the same thing to. I'm a huge believer in forgiveness. I really am. But at the same time, I do believe that there are things that are unforgivable. And I've worked with clients that have been through those things. Um, Myself personally, the things that I've been through in my life, I have been able to find forgiveness for the people that have hurt me. But there are times, right, when we're talking about things as dark and ugly and evil as harming a child, right? Sexually assaulting children, sexual assault itself, right? Um, you don't have to forgive someone for that, right? When you consider things of that nature, and we're talking about forgiveness, now we're looking at forgiving ourselves for time lost on maybe hatred towards that person, or feeling bad about ourselves because of our experience, right? So, but regardless, working with forgiveness, whether that's forgiving someone that hurt you, right? Or whether that's forgiving yourself for time spent sabotaging our own lives because of someone else's treatment towards us, right? But forgiveness is a very, very powerful tool, as you know. And so when it comes to forgiveness, when we're thinking about long-term relationships, we need to be able to look at how somebody treated us, right? And also decide what was our role, right? So what was our role in the relationship before we decide this person was so horrible and now I've got to sit down and try to figure out how to forgive them. Okay, well, backtrack, look over your timeline, and there's possible times in your life, in my life, I've had this, right, where I'm part of the problem. And then forgiving yourself for being a part of the problem, and then forgiving the other person for the role that they played, right? But there's so much freedom in that, right? And so much freedom in being willing to, right? Like, having the capacity to forgive another person when they hurt you is something that will grow you, and it will carry through your life as the decades go on. That'll become easier, right? It'll become more natural for each one of us to offer forgiveness for ourselves and others if we practice it. Because it's like anything else, except for computers for Trish. I'm not tech savvy, but most things in our lives, the more we practice, the better we get at, right? And don't get me wrong, I know there's plenty of other people out there that have tried something over and over again and like, I am not getting this. And that's okay, right? Because we don't have to be good at everything. But when it comes to long-term relationships, if we want our relationships to last decades and like in a lifetime, then we have to be able to build our capacity and forgiveness, right? And grace, offering grace for people. We have to be able to build that so that as time goes on and decades go by, and we find ourselves in the later half of life, that we've actually gotten kind of good at it, right? And so it's easier. It's easier to offer forgiveness, and it's easier to offer grace. And I believe a lot of that comes from looking within, right? Having to be able to offer ourselves grace, offer ourselves compassion. And we're all only human beings, right? And we can only do so much. But at the same time, if we're not willing, we won't get good at it, right? We won't get better at it. We may not, ever become a pro, but if our goal is to have intimate relationships and have relationships where we're offering each other understanding and we're offering each other forgiveness, then we have to put in the practice so that we can get good at it, so that we can maintain healthy relationships, instead of relationships that are combative or chaotic. So, oftentimes you hear about peace, right? And everybody seems to want that peace within. Well, where does that peace from within come from? That peace from within comes from practice. It comes from finding peace within. We don't just decide we want it and then we have it, right? We have to nurture it, and we have to practice and practice and practice before we can embody it and we can carry it with us, right? And so being that person in a relationship, right? Modeling that even maybe for our partner, our sibling, our spouse, or, whatever. Start first, right? It starts with us. Like they said, be the change in the world you want to see, be the love you want to be. And it's the same thing in friendships. You have to be the friend that you want to have. And so what does that look like? Maybe that looks like checking in with a friend. Maybe it looks like bringing little gifts here and there. When you know your friend has an upcoming appointment and you're thinking about it, reach out, ask them, like, hey, do you need anything? And getting together. Now, I understand that sometimes we have friendships that there's a long distance between, but nowadays we have the technology that I'm not that great at operating, but I get it done. Like the Zoom, the FaceTime, the WhatsApp, right? We have all of these different ways that technology has helped us to stay connected. And sometimes those social media platforms nowadays, it's like everybody's going on there and ripping each other's heads off instead of using it for what it was created for in the first place, was to help us stay connected, right? That's what those social media platforms were designed for from the beginning, was for all of us to be able to go, hey, like, I get to keep in contact with you, even though you live 1,000 miles away from me. And so let's remember that, right? Like, let's remember that we have tools at our fingertips that we can stay in contact with people if we want to. And so rather than spending time scrolling, doom scrolling, don't get me wrong, I do it myself here and there. But instead of spending our time that way, like, make the phone call, reach out to your aunt, reach out to your friend, and talk, have a phone call, even shoot a text, so just seeing how you're doing, right? That kind of thing. So anyways, I've got to go to a break for a minute, but I wanted to go ahead and let you know that when we get back from our break, we'll be talking about compassion, right? Compassion and how that acts with the grace and the forgiveness. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Trish Smith, your host of Your Intuitive Talk. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to Pure Intuitive Talk. I'm your host, Trish Smith, and today we are talking about nurturing relationships. What are relationships? Relationships are one person and another person, or even, another living being, like a dog, a cat, a tree, spending time with one another, right? And investing in the other, right? So even if we have pets and we're investing our time with them, right? That's nurturing a relationship. Nowadays, it feels to me like a lot of the social media platforms and even pop psychology are offering this very individualized lifestyle, right? And worrying about yourself, and you don't need to worry about anybody else. And the truth of the matter is that we are all interdependent on each other. Like, you cannot convince me that 8 billion people on this globe are not interdependent on each other. We are. That comes down to our food supply, our water supply, like all of it. We are interdependent on each other. And so we want to treat each other as such. We want to treat each other like the other person matters, because whether or not you're going through the grocery store and you know what that stranger's story is, they have one. They have one. Okay. Every single person has a story. Some people's stories are certainly harder to hear than others, right? I've recognized in my life when I'm telling certain stories that I've been through, people are like, oh, um, and they haven't had as things happen in their lives like I have. And then for myself, I've listened to other people tell their stories. I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, and then you start feeling like, all right, like I had it pretty good, you know? Um, and so I remember once, maybe a couple years ago, seeing a meme and it was about children. My background is early childhood education and special education. So I've worked with thousands of children over a 35-year period. And I saw this meme a couple years ago where it said the behavior behind, the reason behind the behavior that you'll see with a student often would make you cry. Like it wouldn't make you angry, it would make you cry. And that's been my experience. I've been a foster parent and I've, been a mandated reporter for most of my working life. And that's the truth. The truth is those stories will make you cry. And they have for me. I had one student that we turned in. I cried myself to sleep for 3 weeks because of the abuse that the child had been suffering. So when you're walking through the grocery store, you don't know what someone's story is, right? But each person has one. Now, if we know their story and we're willing to offer compassion to them because we know their story, where is the line where we are not having to know their story to offer them compassion, right? Um, yes, right. The story helps our brain go, oh, okay, like that person just lost their child. Oh, I've got to have a heart for them, right? But what about if you don't know the story? Why are we lacking that compassion without the story? Question to ask ourselves as a culture, right? But recently, I'd say in the last couple of years, I see more and more on social media and hear more and more from people that I work with and friends and family about pushing people out, only keeping positive people in your life and those kinds of things. And I know that I've touched on them before, but I think there's a part of me that's fearful because I'm watching people's relationships disintegrate and it almost makes me feel helpless. It's like, how can I help both parties understand, that both parties are hurting and if they could just come together and overlook some of the petty stuff, right? I feel like as time has gone on, as a society, we've become more and more petty, right? There are good reasons to have to cut somebody out of our lives, but it's got to be a good reason. And if we're willing to just push everybody out of our life, right? And then we're relying on just this phone in our hands for connection, we're not going to get deep, meaningful connection, right? So I think it's like 1 in 3, women over the age of 40 are on an antidepressant. Connection, right? We're lacking connection. And if we want our relationships to last long term, we have to be willing to overlook those petty details in the other person, right? Just like we expect them to overlook those petty details about us. Okay. I have ADHD. I have PTSD. My husband and I have been together over 26 years. And let me tell you, he has OCD, he has ADD. And if I nitpicked and I was worried about every single little thing about him, that's, not conducive to me relaxing. That he works and works and works, and I have to force him to sit down. But if I allowed that to bother me, right, where would I be? I'd be irritated with him all the time. And then on the flip of that, right, with my ADHD and my grand ideas all the time that he has to listen to, oh, babe, we should do this. Oh, babe, we should do that. Let's do this. Let's do that. If he allowed those things about me to drive him up the wall, how are we going to make it? How are we going to make it for 26 years? Don't get me wrong. I know there's deal breakers. I have my own little list of deal breakers. I'm sure he has his. But at the end of the day, if you can't overlook the little stuff, you're not going to have long-lasting relationships. And that's true in marriage. That's true with our family members. That's true with friends. That's true with coworkers. That's true with with anybody, right? If you want to have long-term relationships. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that a lot of people are numbing themselves from the pain. And in order for us to have those long-term relationships, we're going to have to go through it, right? We're going to have to go through our own, and we're going to have to go through theirs with them. So again, like I said, last May, we celebrated 26 years since our first date. You don't go through 26 years of a marriage without having fights, without having pain, without having loss, without having all of it, right? Going through it, in your own way, your own individual stuff, and then you bring that into relationship, and going through causing that stuff, for each other, right? And so being able to hold on, right? I know nowadays so many teachings are all about letting go, letting go, let go, let it go, let them go, let everything go. um, but there is definitely an art to holding on, right? And that is knowing when you want to hold on and where you want to hold on, and then having the discipline to do so, right? Not allowing that negative self-talk or those intrusive thoughts, not allowing yourself to project your crap on the next person, like the other person that you're in a relationship with, taking that good, healthy look in the mirror, right? And knowing where you're screwing up, and then changing your own behavior so that you can be a healthier part of the relationship. We can't expect everybody else to do the work for us, right? And I have had more clients in my office that would love for me to just give them the magic answer and wave the magic wand. But the truth is, we have to do the work. I can't do your work. You can't do my work. Every single one of us has to do the work. Can I offer you tools? Yes. Can I practice them for you? No. And so if we're doing our work, that is going to be so much more helpful in being a person that can handle long-term committed relationships, right? Because if we're going to numb and deny, typically we're going to turn away from, right? We're going to take our eyes off of anything that looks painful or overwhelming or challenging, and then we'll go find something that's easier, right? And then we miss out on the experience of having that long-term, intimate, deep, interconnected relationship where someone gets to see you ugly, right? My husband has seen me ugly, after being attacked and kidnapped and dealing with panic attacks. My husband has found me on the floor in my closet crying my brains out, right? After my grandma passed away, I would sob so uncontrollably. Pretty sure I was crying all the tears I wasn't allowed to cry growing up because, I was raised not to cry. But I would sob until I'd get a nosebleed a couple of times. Like my nose started bleeding. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so being willing to be so vulnerable, right? To be so transparent, and share all of us ourselves with the other person is giving them permission to do that also, and removing this superficial nonsense that our society wants us to have with each other, right? And if we don't have those deep connected relationships and we don't have that connection, we're not going to feel the way that we were designed to feel, right? We're going to feel scared, disconnected, lost, confused. Now maybe we're reaching for those antidepressants, right? Why? Because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. Where is love residing? Love is residing within us. We nurture that love within us, right? We nurture the love within our relationships. And it does take two people to do that in a relationship, right? But I want to remind everybody that there are going to be those ebb and flow times where one person is nurturing the relationship more than the other due to their circumstances, right? And so being willing to give another person that time, right? Knowing their story. If you're in a long-term relationship with somebody, you most likely know what it is they're going through, right? And so you offer that space, right? Okay, well, this person just suffered this loss. they're not their best selves right now, I'm going to be here. I'm not going to tolerate abuse, but I'm going to make sure that they have someone to fall on, right? They can lean into me, right? And then we take turns. That's what relationship is. And then, maybe a few years down the road, you're going through something and you didn't abandon them, right? And so then when you're going through that hard time, they don't abandon you. So I guess my ask, the call here is that we don't abandon ourselves, right? And that we don't abandon each other. And we're saying no to abuse, obviously, right? And we can place those hard boundaries when needed. But let's please practice when they're needed, not over petty things. And oftentimes what I'm witnessing is someone actually projecting their own stuff onto the other person, but then placing a boundary because they believe it's the other person, because they've convinced themselves it is, because of their projections. So my call, really, the homework for all of us is looking within, and I have to do the same thing because I'm just as human as you are. So just a friendly reminder to look within. Do not abandon yourself and do not abandon your loved ones, and let's stick together, right? And help each other through and be committed to the long haul with one another. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you spending your time here. If you were looking to work with someone when it comes to how to navigate relationships, you're welcome to reach out. I appreciate you being here. This is Trish Smith on Pure Intuitive Talk. Thank you for listening to Pure Intuitive Talk with me, Trish Smith, your Pure Intuitive Guide. Come back and join us for encouragement to take responsibility and to connect to your whole being. Remember that every moment is the right moment to choose peace, acceptance, and forgiveness. We all have the courage to look deep within, get real with ourselves, and make upgrades to our ways of interacting with the world. It's been my privilege to share this hour with you. For more information about me, go to pureintuitiveguide.com. That's pureintuitiveguide.com. Thanks again, and we will see you here next time on Transformation Talk Radio.